Welcome to the deep silence of the night. Picture this: a campfire crackling before you, its flames dancing in the darkness, surrounded by an eerie forest and a quiet filled with echoes of the past. It's here, in this haunting setting, that the story of one of history's most chilling figures begins. Vlad the Impaler. Long ago, in the wild and rugged lands of Wallachia, one name echoed through the mountains: Vlad Dracula. That name stood for a fearless ruler, a terrifying warrior, and a ruthless leader. But don't think of Vlad as just another ruler. He was a dark figure where legends and reality merged, a blood-soaked page in the book of history. Tonight, I'm not just sharing the story of a man. I'll also unveil the tangled politics of his time, the brutal realities of war, and the sheer power of fear over humanity. This tale will unfold like a grim legend, where fear became a weapon and revenge turned into a legacy. Are you ready? Let's step into Vlad's shadowy world. Ah, my dear friends, let's turn back the hands of time and find ourselves in 15th century Transylvania. Right now we're standing in a world where endless forests stretch as far as the eye can see, and towering mountains cast their shadows over the land. This is a place as beautiful as it is complicated. But beauty doesn't always promise peace, does it? And Transylvania was no exception. Majestic yet dangerous. At the time, these lands were like a political chessboard of Central Europe. The Ottoman Empire's hunger for expansion, the power of the Hungarian kingdom, and the struggles of local principalities all collided here, plunging Transylvania into chaos. The people fought to protect their villages, while bearing the burden of rulers who changed with the wind. But to call Transylvania a land of external threats alone wouldn't do it justice. Inside, things weren't much better. This was a land riddled with the power struggles of noble families, the boyars. Caught in the triangle of Wallachia, Moldavia, and Transylvania, the common folk endured endless taxes and wars, while stories of betrayal and revenge among the nobles spread like wildfire. Amidst this turmoil, the name of the Draculesti family began to resonate. Now, hold on tight, because I'm about to take you back to the roots of this family. The Draculesti weren't just heirs to a great legacy. They also bore a heavy burden. The name Dracul, meaning dragon, came from Vlad's father, Vlad II Dracul. This title was given to him by the King of Hungary. Vlad's father, balancing between the Ottoman and Hungarian powers, was a member of the Order of the Dragon, a chivalric order sworn to defend Christendom against the Ottoman Empire. But this title was a double-edged sword. It brought honor, but also made them a target. Now let's flip through the dusty pages of history. In the winter of 1431, in the small town of Sighisoara, a cry echoed through the snow-covered stone streets and icy walls. It was the moment Vlad came into the world. A tiny cradle witnessed the first steps of a grand destiny. Vlad was the third child of the Draculesti family, born under the shadow of their historical legacy and the political schemes of the time. His father dreamed of Vlad becoming a powerful leader in this turbulent world. But even he couldn't have imagined that Vlad would one day become one of history's most controversial figures. Transylvania's chaotic atmosphere shaped Vlad's early years. As he grew up in this land, he learned the hard truth of survival. Trust was rare, and even friends could become foes. But how did this young Vlad become the infamous figure of bloody legends? How did his father's decisions and the enemies of the Draculesti family set him on this path? Join me in the next chapter as we uncover the answers to these questions together. Ah, my dear listeners, let me take you to an unforgettable chapter in young Vlad's life. Imagine this, a child, looking at the world with innocent eyes, only to be forced to face its harsh realities far too soon. This is the story that defined Vlad's childhood. Growing up in a small village nestled deep in Transylvania, Vlad spent his early years with his brother Radu and older brother Mircea. But his childhood was far from ordinary. Vlad wasn't surrounded by toys or fairy tales. His world was shaped by political schemes, threats, and strategic decisions. His father, Vlad II Dracula, was a ruler walking a tightrope between the Ottoman Empire and the Kingdom of Hungary. Maintaining this delicate balance often required sacrifices greater than anyone could imagine. And then the dark day came. In 1442, during negotiations with the Ottoman Empire, Vlad II Dracula was forced to make a heart-wrenching decision to protect his throne and family. Sultan Murad II demanded a guarantee of Dracula's loyalty, the handover of two of his sons, Vlad and Radu, as hostages. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the weight of this decision on a father's heart. Torn between the agony of surrendering his sons and the duty to safeguard his throne and people, Dracula made the fateful choice. And so, young Vlad and Radu set off for the depths of the Ottoman Empire, heading toward the palace at Edirne. When they arrived on Ottoman soil, everything was foreign to Vlad. The towering palace walls, the unfamiliar languages, the grandeur of Eastern culture. But he didn't let himself be consumed by it. Instead, he observed everything with sharp eyes, soaking in every detail. The Ottomans didn't treat their young hostages merely as prisoners. Vlad received an education from some of the best scholars of the time. He learned Ottoman military strategies, governance systems, and the intricacies of their disciplined army. He studied the Quran and became fluent in Turkish, yet none of this could ease the longing in his heart for his homeland. And this is where the story takes a darker turn. The Ottoman palace wasn't just a place of learning, it was also a test of resilience. Vlad confronted his fears head-on. He watched as his brother Radu embraced the Ottoman way of life, eventually becoming a favorite of the Sultan. This created a growing rift between the brothers. Unlike Radu, Vlad never fully assimilated. Deep inside, the forests of Transylvania called to him. The memory of his family's vulnerability haunted him, and the suffering of his people echoed in his soul. Vlad's years in the Ottoman palace played a pivotal role in shaping his character. He grew into an ambitious, determined, and fiercely resilient young man. Every lesson he learned, every observation he made, became a tool in his arsenal. But those years also nurtured the darkness within him. Outwardly, he appeared to be a compliant student, but inside he harbored dreams of freedom and revenge. And then what happened next? How did this young prince escape the clutches of the Ottoman Empire and begin to carve out his destiny? How did the lessons he learned there eventually transform into a deadly weapon? In the next chapter, we'll uncover Vlad's journey back to Transylvania and witness the birth of the legend cloaked in darkness. Oh, my dear friends, history is full of humanity's deepest pains and brightest triumphs. Today we're diving into the story of a young man who grew up in the shadow of the Draculesti dynasty. But to truly understand his journey, we first need to take a closer look at Vlad's father, Vlad II Dracula, and the complicated legacy he left behind. Vlad II Dracula, as his name suggests, was known as the Son of the Dragon. He earned this title after receiving the dragon emblem from the Holy Roman Emperor, following his father Mircea the Elder. But this dragon wasn't just a symbol of honor. It represented the political schemes and shadowy dealings of his time. All this had to be explained when he died, and the reason he descended to the side of the throne. The 15th century region of Transylvania was a hotbed of conflicting powers. The advancing armies of the Ottoman Empire, the pressures of the Hungarian kingdom, and the internal struggles among feudal lords. In this chaotic world, Dracula's mission was to protect his family and his throne. Yet the moves he made to secure his position often came with dangerous and complex consequences. Dracula played a delicate balancing act, offering concessions to win the loyalty of the Ottoman Sultan while maintaining ties with the Hungarian kingdom. Unfortunately, walking this tightrope earned him both friends and enemies. The feudal lords viewed his decisions with suspicion. Some saw him as a traitor, while others admired his bold leadership. But his greatest challenge came when he was forced to hand over two of his sons to the Ottomans as hostages. This decision wasn't just a blow to his fatherly instincts, it also jeopardized the future of his dynasty. After sending his sons to the Ottomans, Dracula's political situation became even more tangled. The Ottomans doubted his loyalty and increased their pressure on him, while the Hungarian kingdom accused him of betrayal for allying too closely with their enemy. Trapped between these two powerful forces, Dracula found himself on a dangerous path that ultimately led to his downfall. In 1447, a conspiracy of his enemies culminated in his assassination. The political intrigue and internal conflicts of the time paved the way for this tragic end. His death meant not only the loss of a leader for the Draculisti family, but also the loss of a father for young Vlad. So, how did this complex legacy shape Vlad's character? Witnessing his father's tough decisions, how could a young boy not question the meaning of justice and revenge? Was Vlad's hunger for power driven by a desire to rebuild his family's legacy? Or was it fueled by the emotional turmoil of losing his father to such treachery? The death of Vlad Dracul ignited more than just anger in Vlad. It sparked a sense of purpose. From that moment on, Vlad's life revolved around two crucial missions: to honor the Draculesti name and to become the sword of justice in the blood-stained lands his father left behind. But how much blood would need to be spilled to fulfill this mission? In the next chapter, we'll uncover Vlad's return to Transylvania and how he began to carve out his destiny step by step. Are you ready? Because this is just the beginning of how a legend was born. Ah, dear friends, let me tell you about those turbulent days when young Vlad started taking control of his own fate. Even at a young age, the years he spent as a prisoner in the Ottoman palace left deep scars on his soul. He learned what betrayal and loyalty truly meant, and saw firsthand that both friends and enemies could sit at the same table. That's exactly why, when the chance to claim the throne of Wallachia with the support of the Ottomans came, he knew what kind of game he was stepping into. But no preparation could ever fully prepare him for the brutal realities of the power struggle. It was 1448. Ottoman Sultan Murad II planned to use Vlad as a pawn to increase his influence over Wallachia. At the time, Wallachia was like a battlefield between the Ottoman Empire and the Kingdom of Hungary. Both great powers wanted to control the small piece of land to gain a strategic advantage. The Draculesti dynasty, torn apart by Vlad's father's policies, was nothing more than a memory to the people of Wallachia. But the Ottomans saw the weight that Vlad's name still carried, and they thought using it to their advantage was a smart move. With Sultan Murad's second support, Vlad set off for Wallachia. He had Ottoman soldiers and political backing behind him, but this journey felt less like a victory march and more like a test. Vlad had to apply the patience and strategy he'd learned at the Ottoman court to the fractured lands of Wallachia. When he took the throne, the people didn't trust him much. They saw him as nothing more than an Ottoman puppet and doubted he could restore the dynasty's former power. But Vlad was playing his own game in the midst of all this. Vlad's first reign served as a harsh reminder that the throne came with a real price. As soon as he took the throne of Wallachia, a powerful enemy emerged, the Kingdom of Hungary and a rival from another dynasty backed by them. This competition didn't just threaten Vlad's power, it threatened his life. With the crown on his head, he knew he could find himself under the shadow of an enemy's sword at any moment. The throne made him powerful, but it also weighed heavily on his shoulders. Sadly, even with Ottoman support, Vlad wasn't able to hold on to his power. After just a few months of rule, he was forced off the throne by the pressure of his rivals. Once again, he had to flee into exile. But dear friends, don't worry. This wasn't the end of Vlad's story. It was just the beginning. The years he spent in exile were when he would gather strength again and redefine himself. So did Vlad ever return to the throne of Wallachia? And if he did, what kind of vengeance and power struggle did he face? You'll have to wait and see, because these answers will leave you on the edge of your seat. Ah, dear friends, now let me take you to one of the darkest, yet most instructive periods of Vlad's life. His defeat in his first reign left deep scars on his soul, but those wounds also forged his iron will. During those difficult days of exile from the throne of Wallachia, Vlad was no longer just an exile. He was a hunter, patiently waiting for the right moment, and he knew that when the time came, he would rule over his prey. He spent his years of exile in Hungary, but this period was not just an escape for him, it was a time of rebuilding. Seeking refuge in the court of King Hunyadi of Hungary, Vlad managed to form powerful alliances. King Hunyadi was a symbol of resistance against the Ottoman Empire, and by aligning himself with him, Vlad not only plotted his revenge, but also honed his political intelligence and military strategies. His years at the Hungarian court allowed Vlad to not only gain allies but also see the opportunities that would reshape his destiny. During his time in Hungary, Vlad didn't just build political ties. He worked tirelessly to gather an army and form a loyal base of supporters. His years in exile left a profound impact on the people of Wallachia as well. Even though Vlad was exiled, the influence of the Draculesti name still held strong among the people. Vlad's desire to return to his homeland began to shine like a beacon of hope for the people. His plans to reclaim the throne were fueled not just by his own ambition, but also by the people's desire for a solution to their lives, caught between Ottoman and Hungarian influences. Finally, the year 1456 arrived. This year marked a significant turning point, not just for Vlad, but for Wallachia as well. With the support of his Hungarian allies, Vlad took action to execute the plan he had been preparing for so long. For him, this wasn't just a battle, it was a march to victory. In this land, caught between the Ottoman and Hungarian kingdoms, Vlad wasn't just aiming to be a ruler, but to be a defender of justice and order. His return to the throne happened thanks to his courage, intelligence, and determination. Vlad's second rise to the throne of Wallachia occurred in a very different atmosphere from his first. This time, he was not a puppet of the Ottomans. He was a leader asserting his own will. His return marked the beginning of a new era in Wallachia's history. But dear friends, this return was not without its challenges. Although Vlad had reclaimed the throne, his enemies were still lurking in the shadows. Facing both internal traitors and external threats, this young ruler found himself drawn into a bloody struggle. So, would Vlad be able to defend his throne this time? Or would his new victory lead him into an even darker fate? You'll have to wait patiently, dear listeners, to find out. Now, my children, come. let me take you to one of the harshest yet most lesson-filled periods of reign in history. When Vlad ascended to the throne of Wallachia for the second time, he was no longer just a young prince. He had become a leader shaped by the lessons of his experiences. The pain, betrayals, and years of exile that he carried in his heart molded his leadership style. His sense of justice, while considered cruel by some, was seen as salvation by others. But know this, Vlad's reign was never a typical one. When he set to work rebuilding Wallachia, Vlad had a clear goal in mind: to restore order. He was determined to create a system of justice, but his vision was far from a regular court or a system confined by laws. Vlad wanted to eradicate crime and immorality at their root, and he did so with an iron fist. Did you steal? Did you deceive the people with false words? Well then, get ready to meet Vlad's impaling stakes. Yes, the impalement penalty became a symbol of his justice. However, friends, these punishments weren't just to instill fear. Vlad had a purpose: to instill honesty and order in his people. It is said that during his reign, a single gold coin could remain untouched for days, even in the most remote marketplaces of Wallachia. Vlad took pride in maintaining this order. Yes, his rule was harsh, but people began calling him Law Vlad. They trusted his justice because this rigid rule also guaranteed their safety. But my friends, the success of a reign isn't measured by fear alone, is it? Vlad also carried out reforms to improve the welfare of his people. He protected trade routes, reorganized the tribute system, and promoted commerce to strengthen Wallachia's economy. He aimed to be the voice of not just the wealthy, but also the peasants. Even a farmer's complaint could echo in his palace. Yet even during these reforms, he never abandoned his firmness and resolve. In his eyes, the price of order had to be paid, no matter the cost. Of course, maintaining this balance wasn't easy. Among his people, there were those who were almost fanatically loyal to him, and there were those who despised him. Vlad managed to walk the fine line between fear and respect. Under his rule, even his enemies had to tread cautiously, because Vlad wanted to send a message, not only to his people, but also to his external enemies. In this land, the price of betrayal is steep. This is why Vlad's name echoed not just in Wallachia, but across Europe. But my friends, power and resolve always give birth to new enemies, don't they? Would Vlad be able to protect his throne and withstand the endless games of his enemies? Well, you'll have to wait a little longer to find out the answer to that. Ah, my children, when you hear the name Vlad the Impaler, don't you feel a shiver run down your spine? That title is not just a nickname. It is the essence of a legend that has inspired both fear and awe throughout history. Vlad didn't earn this name by chance. His methods of rule, with their brutal yet clear messages to his enemies, and even sometimes to his own people, shaped his reign. He created a symbol where justice and power existed together, a symbol brought to life in a field filled with stakes and death. Vlad didn't punish his enemies like an ordinary ruler. His methods were far more than just an act of vengeance. They carried a deep strategy. The method of impalement wasn't just a physical punishment. It was a psychological weapon. Pure fear in its form, Vlad would impale captured enemies, traitors, and those who broke the law, displaying them on stakes in full view of the public. The festivities, Christmas masses, impalements, and proletariat revolutions, those stakes were not just the final resting place for criminals, but became engraved lessons in the minds of everyone who saw them. People could never forget those scenes, and when they heard Vlad's name, they would tremble. But this method wasn't just for punishment. Vlad's stakes also became a psychological weapon on the battlefield. Imagine, if you will, enemy soldiers marching toward Wallachia would see hundreds, sometimes thousands, of impaled corpses lining the roads. In those moments, even before the battle had begun, the morale of the enemy would crumble. With this terrifying method, Vlad didn't just break his enemy's courage, he also sent them a message. There will be no tolerance for betrayal or attack in this land. Yet these fields filled with stakes weren't just meant for foreign enemies. Vlad also used these methods to keep his own people in line. Those who stole, lied, or disturbed the social order would face the same fate. In this way, he showed everyone in Wallachia just how merciless yet definitive justice could be. The people feared Vlad, but this fear was accompanied by deep respect. Because with these methods, Vlad ended the chaos and restored order. He practically built a system of order with his own hands, said Richard. But, my children, how far did this harsh rule take Vlad? His stakes became not only symbols of fear, but also symbols of power and authority. Yet this method earned him far more enemies than allies. Wouldn't the balance between justice and terror come at a price? Could Vlad continue walking down this dark path? Well, to find out, you'll have to be ready for the next part of the tale. Ah, my dear friends, now let me take you to one of the bloodiest and most challenging battles in history. It is the mid-15th century. The Ottoman Empire is advancing deep into Eastern Europe, expanding its borders. But in this advance, there rises a dark shadow along the banks of the Danube River. A man by the name of Vlad Dracula, the Prince of Wallachia, also known as Vlad the Impaler. For him, this struggle was not just about land, but about survival. And believe me, Vlad rewrote the rules of warfare with his bloody pen. To resist the Ottoman forces was like climbing a giant mountain. Sultan Mehmed II's army consisted of well-trained soldiers and almost invincible discipline and modern weapons. Vlad, on the other hand, had a small but courageous army. This is why he didn't engage in direct battles. Instead, he turned to guerrilla tactics against the Ottomans. The dark forests, deep valleys, and narrow paths along the Danube became Vlad's battlefield. Ottoman soldiers at every corner found traps. With each step, danger awaited them. This was a war where neither swords nor armor offered protection. It was a battle of the minds. Vlad's famous scorched earth policy descended upon his enemies like a nightmare. As the Ottoman army advanced, they found no villages, no farms, and no food ahead of them. Vlad would burn his own land without hesitation, destroy crops, and poison wells. While the enemy soldiers struggled with hunger, thirst, and disease, the shadow of Vlad, hidden in the forests, loomed over them. At night, Vlad would conduct sudden raids on Ottoman camps, and by morning the soldiers would be met with horrific sights. One of his most infamous tactics was psychological warfare. As the Ottoman army advanced through Vlad's lands, they encountered terrifying scenes of thousands of impaled bodies lining the roads. This fear not only shook the souls of enemy soldiers, but also led them to question their own leaders. What kind of monster is this man? How can we fight him? They would ask. And one night, Vlad displayed one of his greatest masterpieces, the night raid. The Ottoman army had set up camp in Wallachia. In the silence of the night, Vlad and his men infiltrated the Ottoman camp. They created chaos with torches, setting the enemies against each other. This raid caused the Ottomans to suffer great losses and delivered a severe blow to their morale. Sultan Mehmed II's army could never have anticipated that the war would become so brutal. But the dear friends, in this fierce struggle, it is not only Vlad's merciless methods toward his enemies that matter, it is also how these methods affected his own people. His policies were applied not just against foreign enemies, but also against internal threats to his throne. Vlad's stakes and fear-inducing tactics impacted both friends and foes alike. Yet surely these dark tactics must have an end, right? So how long could Vlad, who defied the Ottoman advance so fiercely, continue to resist such a colossal power? Where did his fate become sealed in this war? To find out, you must listen to the next chapter of our tale. Ah, my friends, the history of the Danube River's deep blue waters has been shaped not only by fertile lands but also by blood and tears. The lands surrounding this river have echoed with the footsteps of great armies and have been shaken by the reverberations of colossal battles for centuries. And in these very lands, there was a name that dared to challenge the advancing borders of the Ottoman Empire. Vlad Dracula. For him, the struggle to halt the Ottoman advance in this strategic region was not just a defense of the homeland, but a battle for his very existence. As the Ottoman armies drew closer to the banks of the Danube, Vlad's eyes would gleam with a dark ambition. For him, the Danube was not just a waterway, it was a line of defense. Allowing the Ottoman forces to cross this river would be like stabbing a dagger into the heart of Wallachia. This is why Vlad transformed his strategies into a deadly art. He fortified the forests and swamps surrounding the Danube with traps, turning every corner of the narrow paths into scenes of death. With night raids, he would disorient the enemy, and by day he would disappear into the shadows, leaving no trace. But, my friends, Vlad's name was known not only for his mastery on the battlefield, but also for the terrifying punishments he inflicted on his enemies. One such infamous tale begins with the unimaginable punishment he meted out to Ottoman envoys. Sultan Mehmed II had sent envoys to the Danube River's shores to test Vlad's loyalty to the Ottoman Empire and force him to submit. These envoys, adorned in luxurious robes symbolizing the might of the Ottoman Empire, proudly presented themselves before Vlad. They delivered the message from their sultan with cold composure, refusing to remove their turbans in accordance with their cultural traditions. At that moment, Vlad's dark intelligence came into play. He saw their refusal to remove their turbans as an insult. He commanded that they never remove their turbans again, but not as a simple warning. No, my friends, he had them nailed to their heads, forcing them to wear their turbans for eternity. This horrific punishment not only shocked the Ottoman envoys, but also stunned Sultan Mehmed II. With this act, Vlad wasn't just instilling fear in his enemies. He was also openly displaying his own power and determination. This chilling event became a symbol of the battles around the Danube. Vlad aimed to defeat his enemies not just with weapons, but within their minds. As Ottoman soldiers tried to pass through the impaled barricades, burned villages, and terrifying traps that Vlad had set up along the river, they began questioning how their leaders could contend with such a merciless man. But dear friends, where would the bloody struggles along the Danube ultimately lead? Could Vlad's reign of terror truly halt the relentless advance of the Ottomans? Or would the waters of the Danube herald even greater conflicts? Come, let us uncover the next chapter of this tale together. Ah, my dear friends, in these dark corners of history, it is not only external enemies who cast their shadows. Internal traitors loom just as large. When Vlad returned from the battles along the Danube, he found himself not only facing the Ottoman Empire, but also the betrayal of his own people. From the outside, he appeared to be a strong ruler, but the unrest within was like an invisible earthquake shaking the very foundation of his throne. In the complex politics of Wallachia, Vlad's enemies were not only those who carried swords, they were also those who whispered in the corridors of the palace, hiding behind masks. The ancient aristocracy of Wallachia, the boyars, had long manipulated rulers like puppets in order to maintain their power. But Vlad was not a man to bow to their games. The betrayals he had witnessed in his childhood had forged in his heart a resolve and a hardness. So when he ascended the throne, he began to see the boyars, who controlled the nobility of Wallachia, as a threat. To Vlad, these men were not defenders of the homeland, they were traitors, concerned only with their own interests. And these traitors were held responsible for the calamities that befell his family. His father, Vlad Dracula, and his brother Mircea had both lost their thrones and lives because of the boyars' intrigues. These pains left indelible marks on the young Vlad's soul. Thus, from the moment Vlad ascended to the throne, he waged an unrelenting battle against the boyars. This battle was not only political, it was also a psychological war. Vlad hosted a feast to demonstrate his power and intimidate the boyars. During the feast, he questioned their loyalty and asked how many times they had switched allegiance to a new ruler. The answers were blunt enough to switch Vlad's fury. These men had spent years scheming behind the backs of each new ruler, selling their loyalty for money and power. Vlad could not forgive this betrayal. Many of the boyars were executed after the feast, while others were condemned to work on relentless construction projects. According to legend, the famous Punari castle was not just built by their sweat, but by their blood as well. However, my friends, the struggle with the boyars was not limited to open hostility. Vlad also found himself entangled in a web of treachery and conspiracy within his own court. In his conflict with the Ottomans, some of Wallachia's leading families chose to collaborate with the enemy. Many who appeared to be loyal to Vlad were, in fact, busy digging his grave. At every meeting, every banquet, behind every word or glance, there were treacherous plans hidden. This constant scheming only deepened Vlad's loneliness, for there was no one left in whom he could trust. His soldiers were under his command, but within the palace halls, there was not a friend to be found. Loneliness is a heavy burden for a ruler, my friends. As Vlad carried this weight, the number of his enemies grew with each passing day. The vengeful glances of the boyars, the whispers echoing in the palace corridors, and the plots of betrayal occupied his mind incessantly. Yet he did not falter. Vlad used harsh and merciless methods to overcome all this hostility. The entire operandi, for that matter, he explained to His Majesty. To him, the punishment for treason was not limited to death. It had to become a fearsome tale that would be engraved in the minds of his enemies. But dear friends, what would be the price of these internal struggles? Could Vlad consolidate his power by eliminating the intrigues of the boyars and the traitors in his court? Or would this ongoing battle only isolate and weaken him further? Come, let us witness together in the next chapter how Vlad's dark and bloody strategies unfold. Ah, my dear friends, the winds of fate always test even the mightiest of rulers. We have reached a time when Vlad the Impaler's reign has come to one of its darkest and most critical turning points. Sultan Mehmed II, also known as Fatih Sultan Mehmed, could no longer tolerate the unrest in Wallachia. Vlad's guerrilla tactics along the Danube, the casualties he inflicted on Ottoman forces, and the terrifying tales that spread along the riverbanks had finally pushed Fatih's patience to its limits. Sultan Mehmed had set out not only to crush Vlad's resistance, but to uproot his entire dynasty. I remember those days, my friends. The vast plain stretching along the Danube had borne witness to the relentless march of the Ottoman army, flowing like a river of steel. Sultan Mehmed advanced with an army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, artillery, and supplies, a force that symbolized not just military power, but the Sultan's determination and strength. Vlad, though filled with courage and cunning, could not withstand such an overwhelming force. As the Ottoman army advanced, Vlad's defenses began to crumble. His famous tactics, so effective against local forces, lost their power against a seasoned army like the Ottomans. Villages of Wallachia fell one by one into Ottoman hands, and Vlad had no choice but to retreat towards the inevitable end. At last, in the summer of 1462, Vlad faced a crushing defeat. The Ottoman army had completely overwhelmed his resistance, deposed him from the throne, and cast him aside. Yet, as always, Vlad did not abandon his fight. Rather than fall into Sultan Mehmet's hands, he chose to flee towards Hungary, hoping to gain the support of King Matthias Corvinus. But my friends, the world of politics is never as simple as it seems. Matthias, instead of welcoming Vlad as an ally, captured him as an enemy. Vlad found himself a prisoner, shackled far from his homeland. Vlad's years of captivity represented more than just physical chains. During his imprisonment in Hungary, his name took on a legendary status across Western Europe. His cruelty, his ruthless battle against the Ottomans, and his defiance in the face of overwhelming odds echoed throughout Christendom. Many in Europe saw Vlad not as a tyrant, but as a hero, a symbol of resistance against the Ottoman Empire. His harsh methods were criticized, yes, but to the Christian world, this man who stood fearless against the mighty Ottomans had become a figure akin to a martyr, a saintly warrior. During his captivity, Vlad did not waste time in prison. He sent secret letters, kept in touch with his supporters in the West, and closely observed the political shifts in both the Ottoman and Hungarian courts. He bided his time, waiting for the day he would regain his freedom. For him, captivity was merely a pause, the beginning of a greater return. After many years in chains, at last, Vlad's path to freedom was opened. King Matthias Corvinus, realizing the necessity of opening a new front against the Ottomans, decided to release Vlad once more. But my friends, Vlad was never a man to play the role of someone else's pawn. As soon as he regained his freedom, he set out to reclaim the throne of Wallachia. However, much had changed in the years of his absence. Vlad's old allies, the boyars, and much of the populace were no longer on his side. Moreover, the shadow of the Ottomans still loomed over Wallachia like a dark cloud. Vlad managed to sit on the throne of Wallachia one final time, but his past strength seemed to elude him. This time, there were no vast armies nor loyal allies standing beside him. His story was nearing its conclusion, a tale of solitude and relentless struggle. So my friends, how did Vlad's final battle unfold? Could this great ruler stand firm against both the Ottomans and his own people in his last moments? Let us bear witness to the final chapter of Vlad's dark and bloody saga. Ah, my dear friends, as the sun slowly fades on the horizon, we approach the final act of an unforgettable era in the halls of history. Vlad the Impaler, a man whose name is forever associated with fear and terror, was a man who fought relentlessly throughout his life, yet the last years of his life became both a summit and a sharp decline. Let us delve together into the dark and uncertain final years of Vlad's existence. In 1476, Vlad sat on the throne of Wallachia once more. However, this time the throne was neither a symbol of victory nor of power. It was more like a flickering torch in the shadow of swords. Wallachia, trapped between the Ottoman Empire and Hungary, had once stood as a fortress beneath Vlad's rule, but now he was a solitary figure. The people had lost their trust in him. Instead, he led them to their assassinations and a set of trials to be conducted over the course of a week. The boyars still whispered his name in fear, but this fear was no longer the loyalty-infused fear of the past. The Ottoman Empire, too, saw Vlad's return to the throne not only as an inconvenience, but as something to be eliminated. Sultan Mehmed II's armies were once again advancing toward the Danube to crush Vlad's resistance. Vlad, having armed himself once again, tried to display the courage and leadership of his former days, but times had changed. The ravaged land of Wallachia and the fragile alliances he had left had become his greatest enemies. Legends tell different versions of his final battle. Some say Vlad faced the Ottoman forces one last time along the banks of the Danube. Others speak of him leading a small group, almost as though embarking on a suicide mission, charging toward the Ottomans. But Vlad was never an easy target. His courage and brutality were such that they made even his enemies shudder in battle. However, no matter how fiercely he fought, this time fate had woven a tighter web for him. One theory suggests that Vlad was killed by an Ottoman soldier, his head severed and presented to Sultan Mehmed II. Another story claims that Vlad was accidentally killed by his own men, mistaken for an enemy due to the chaos of battle. Yet, my friends, history itself cannot provide a definitive answer. Vlad's death, like his life, remains shrouded in the dark veil of mystery. According to some accounts, his head was taken to Istanbul and presented to Sultan Mehmed. This, perhaps, is the cruelest irony of his life. A man who had fought so fiercely against the Ottomans was ultimately handed to them in this way. However, the fate of his body, where it was buried or how it was honored, remains a puzzle. Many claim that his body was buried in the Snagov monastery in Wallachia, while others argue that this is just another myth. Ah, my friends, after Vlad's death, only stories and terrifying legends remain. Historians from both the Ottoman Empire and Europe have alternately painted him as a hero or a demon. Yet the truth is that Vlad the Impaler, throughout his life, was a figure who could not be subdued, and after his death, he became a legend. But tell me, dear friends, how was Vlad's legacy received in Wallachia after his death? Was his name still seen as that of a savior, or merely a terrifying memory? Let us seek the answers to these questions in the hidden lines of history. Ah, my dear friends, as we approach the end of our journey through the deep waters of history, we see that what stands before us is not just the story of a single man. Vlad the Impaler, or Kachikli Voivoda, was not merely a ruler of his time. Over time, he became a figure who inspired myths, legends, and even terrifying dreams. His pains, struggles, and harsh policies etched his name into the pages of history, and the marks he left behind are still subjects of debate and conversation today. Yet these marks have not remained confined to history alone. They have also taken root deep within literature and popular culture. Perhaps the most famous examples of these marks go beyond history. Vlad the Impaler's name marks a turning point, especially among the people of Wallachia and its surrounding regions. This courageous leader, who stood against the Ottoman Empire's expansionist policies, is remembered not only for his cruelty, but also for his desire to protect his people. In the dark ages of Eastern Europe, his actions were simultaneously feared and seen as a shield against external threats. Vlad did everything in his power to maintain his people's independence and bring peace to his land. Yes, his methods were often ruthless and bloody. But dear friends, how many leaders in these lands were not merciless in their own way? Vlad's rule, filled with impalements and grim policies, both protected and intimidated his people. Today, in the villages of Wallachia, tales about him are still told, where his name is sometimes that of a savior, sometimes that of a demon. However, one thing is clear. No one in his time could match his ability to instill fear in his enemies. Ottoman soldiers reportedly withdrew at the mere mention of his name, while in his own land he maintained order with an iron fist. This is why Vlad's legacy has left an indelible mark on the identity of Eastern Europe. However, dear friends, to regard Vlad the Impaler only as a historical figure would be incomplete. His legacy has resurfaced centuries later in the world of literature. In the 19th century, an Irish author named Bram Stoker, while writing a dark tale, drew inspiration from Vlad's bloody legacy, giving birth to the Dracula legend. Stoker transformed the tales of Vlad's harsh rule and terrifying stories into a vampire myth set in the misty mountains of Transylvania. Though the character of Dracula doesn't match Vlad's real-life actions exactly, his cruelty and terrifying methods shaped this literary figure. A vampire who feeds on human blood and hides in the depths of darkness, this character eventually transcended literature, living on in cinema, television, comic books, and video games. Vlad's name remains the cornerstone of this myth, continuing to haunt popular culture like a shadow. Today, when his name is mentioned, the first thing that may come to mind is a blood-drinking vampire. But my friends, the real Vlad was far more complex and real than any vampire. Vlad the Impaler is still debated by many as to whether he was a hero or a tyrant. His legacy is both a source of national pride and a reminder of history's brutal faith. While he is remembered in Eastern Europe as a symbol of the struggle for independence, in the Western world, he has become a symbol of fear and terror. His story lives on both in the historical records written by regional historians and in the depths of imagination, retold and transformed in various ways. So, my dear friends, will Vlad the Impaler's legacy remain on the dusty shelves of history? Or will it continue to live on with new stories and interpretations? The answer to this question lies in the hands of those of us who continue to listen to his legend. Now, as we leave behind this dark figure of history, we may prepare for our journey toward another era, another hero, or perhaps another tyrant. But tell me, how many more unforgettable stories lie hidden in the depths of this world's history?